Hey guys, Victor here, coming at you again with another deck profile, and for today's video we'll be doing an updated Danger Dark World list. Now this is going to be post the January 2026 Forbidden and Limitless, which, while it didn't actually bring anything back that we can use to our advantage, it did do a lot of other really good things for the deck, as it just pretty much lowered the overall power level of a lot of the current top decks by giving a lot of, I don't want to say detrimental hits, but effective hits to decks like K9, Mitsurugi, Yami, Malice, things of all that nature. Even Dracotail, right, which has basically been everyone's number one deck, wasn't like spared any type of hits, even though for the most part it's not that all unchanged or whatever. But the main impact from the new Forbidden and Limited list actually comes from the semi-limiting of Droll and Lockbird, as it's a pretty good sign of things to come, where eventually that card will be banned, as every time Droll gets used on us, it's basically an auto loss, right? So as the card continues to go down, the overall potential of this deck continues to go up. So ideally we'll eventually get to a point where that card's at 0 and you can basically do whatever you want with Dark World for free, without any fear of repercussions of Droll and Lockbird having on this deck. So with that out of the way, let's jump right into it. As always, we're going to be starting off with the monster lineup first, and the first card is of course going to be Genta, Gateman of Dark World, which we will be playing at 3, as it is the best starter in the list bar none, as you just discard it and then you get to search your deck for the Gates of Dark World, and then the Gates of Dark World will allow you to start discarding and drawing more cards until eventually you get to the point where you have every resource you could ever imagine, right? And as if that wasn't already good enough, when this card happens to be banished and you control a face-up Dark World card, which you will because you're more than likely going to have the Gates of Dark World on the field, it's able to bring itself back. So it's a starter that turns into an extender. The only real downside to Genta is that it can only be special summoned once per turn, period. So if you happen to bring it back with its own effect, that means that you're not going to be able to summon any copies out of your hand through the use of cards like Saryuja, or bring them back from the graveyard if you happen to go into something like a Muckraker or a Dugaris, for example, right? So you do have to be a little bit aware, because that means that you have to manage your graveyard just a little bit better, because there are certain situations where keeping this in the grave and then banishing something else can be entirely detrimental. So yeah, 3 Genta, phenomenal card, but it does have a pretty big downside just to be aware of. Then to go with our 3 Gentas, we're playing our 3 Snoww, Unlight of Dark World. You just discard it and then you get to search your deck for any Dark World card. Really simple, really straightforward. And then for the final 3 of Dark World monster, it's still of course going to be Reign-beaux, Overking of Dark World, where when this one is discarded, allows you to search your deck for any level 5 or higher Dark World monster except itself. So this is going to be the primary method that we use to be able to get access to cards like Sillva and Grapha pretty much immediately, or if you happen to play them, you can also search out Lucent and like Gold, for example. But the real power for Reign-beaux, of course, always comes from its graveyard effect, where you're able to bounce back any of your face-up level 7 or lower Dark World monsters to your hand in order to special summon this card from the graveyard. As that pretty much just allows you to refill your hand to constantly be able to replenish it in order to have more fodder to discard and just continuously cycle through your deck. So yeah, 3 Reign-beaux, perfectly fine. Then that's it for the 3 outs. For the 2 of Dark World monsters, we have our 2 Grapha, Dragon Lord of Dark World, which when this one is discarded, just pops a card on the opponent's side of the field, which, I mean, if you're going first, it basically doesn't matter most of the time. Now, there are certain situations where you have to be careful, because if you've given your opponent like a ceruli, right, for example, and you end up popping it, you're going to be having a pretty difficult time getting it back without locking yourself into other things that you typically don't want to face, right? So this is a mandatory pop as well, so just something to be aware of, right? But once again, the real power of Grapha comes from its graveyard effect, where much like Reign-beaux, it's able to bounce back any of your face-up Dark World monsters. It doesn't have the level 7 or lower restriction. Instead, you just can't go Grapha for Grapha, but every other Dark World monster is fair game. So yeah, just 2 phenomenal cards that basically just allow us to continuously replenish our hand to ensure that we always have ample fodder for discarding. Then to go with our 2 Graphas, we're going to be playing our 2 Sillva, Warlord of Dark World, which whenever I play the Danger Dark World list, I basically just always go for the Sillva hand loop, because I figured might as well just go for the all-in degenerate strategy, right? You don't really lose anything from it, and I don't really see the point of trying to play this as like an honest deck. If you have the degenerate option available to you, might as well use it, right? And that's literally what Sillva's for. But even if you're not hand looping with this, Sillva is just like another phenomenal card. As just discard it, it special summons itself, and this is going to be one of the primary methods, or I guess cards, that we're going to be using, and ideally bouncing back to our hand through the use of cards like our Reign-beaux and our Grapha. So yeah, 2 Sillva, also perfectly fine. And then for the final Dark World monster, we have Ceruli, Guru of Dark World, where this is basically the one that allows us to finish off the hand loop, right? Or I guess not finish it, but start it. As you just discard it, its effect activates, you give it to the opponent, and then it'll activate on their side of the field, forcing us to discard. And yeah, that's pretty good because it means that you'll be able to trigger all of your Dark World secondary effects if they happen to have them. And that's basically how we are able to accomplish the Sillva hand loop, because you just discard the Sillva, brings itself back, loops the opponent for 2. You end up bouncing both of these back to hand at some point, and then do it again, loop them for 2 more, and then from there the game is basically wrapped up. So yeah, 1 ceruli, that's all you need. Then for the danger monsters, because this is a danger Dark World list, I decided to go with basically 2 of each for everything, just because I didn't really want to clog my hand on too many of them, right? As you don't typically want to have as many similar names as possible, and if you basically max out on all of them, you're going to be running into that situation a lot, as that means that you're not going to be able to take advantage of the graveyard effects as often as possible, which is pretty detrimental, because the graveyard effects, oddly enough, do actually matter a lot more sometimes than just the special summon draw one. But yeah, even so, we got our 2 danger Nessies, 2 danger Tsuchinoko, 2 danger jackalope, 2 danger Mothman, and lastly the 1 danger Bigfoot. You don't need more than 1 of this guy, and Chupacabra is awful, so you don't need to play that guy either. Same goes for Ogopogo. This is typically more than enough, and all of these effects are obviously very solid, which for the 2 ofs anyways, which is what we're playing them at 2 as danger Nessie, is able to search out another danger monster. Danger Mothman basically becomes Dark World dealings when it's discarded. Danger Tsuchinoko and danger jackalope guarantee another danger monster into the field no matter what. And then danger Bigfoot, I mean, it just pops a card, so it's about as useful as Grapha's pop effect, which isn't very. But even so, they more than get the job done. And then because we're leaning all into the degeneracy aspect, we of course got to go with Gen, the Diamond Tiger, and Ken, the Warrior Dragon, where you just normal the Gen, give the opponent Ken with its effect. Ken will trigger, allowing you to draw 2, discard 1, and it basically counts as like another ceruli that lets you draw 2 cards. So yeah, if these cards resolve, the game is basically also wrapped up at that point. So yeah, pretty ignorant stuff. And with that, that's the monster lineup, and now we can finally move on to the spell and trap portion of the list. Now that we're on the spell and trap lineup, we're going to be starting off with the 3 ofs first, and the first card is going to be 3, the Gates of Dark World, which, I mean, what's there to say about this card? You just activate it, and then you're able to start discarding and drawing cards, which is basically what this deck is all about. Seems like a no-brainer, and of course it's also searchable off of your Genta, right? So yeah, 3 seems like a no-brainer. Then to go with our 3 Gates of Dark World, we're going to be playing 3 Allure of Darkness, which, I mean, this deck is basically all darks outside of getting Ken, and that basically translates to this card being just a free draw 2 every single time, right? And as for what you typically want to banish off of this card, I'd more than likely prioritize the danger monsters that have already activated in the graveyard, because those just aren't as effective as the ones that haven't activated yet. And even if you have to banish like a Dark World monster, it's perfectly fine in most situations, right? Even though you typically want to avoid banishing cards like the ceruli, because we only play the 1, and the Sillva and the grapha, because we play 2 of those, and they are pretty important to the overall combo that this deck tries to accomplish. But if you do end up banishing one of those 3, it typically means you're either like in a really bad spot anyways, or you're already so far ahead of the opponent that it doesn't matter. So yeah, 3 Allure of Darkness, just great for general consistency. And then that's it for the 3 ofs. For the 2 ofs, we're playing 2 Dark Corridor, which just adds any Dark World monster from your deck to your hand, and then you get to discard any cards. So these are basically just like all of our main consistency pieces. And typically I wouldn't be playing such a heavy count, right? Like I'd usually go with like 1 Dark Corridor and like 2 Allure of Darknesses. But because draw went down to 2, that means I'm feeling a little bit more more bold. And as a result, I basically elected to completely ignore the existence of that card, even though you absolutely should not. You know, it's very much still a real card that can just auto win the game against you. So, but for the purposes of this deck profile, I've elected to basically ignore it and assume that it won't be happening to me as often as possible, right? Which, I mean, it's Yu-Gi-Oh! You shouldn't be thinking like that, but sometimes it's okay too. But yeah, 2 Dark Corridor, perfectly fine. Then for the 1 ofs, we have our Dark World Asccession, which is just our fusion to be able to summon out the fusion grapha. 1 Call by the Grave to be able to stop any detrimental hand traps. And then we're also going to be playing 1 Triple Tactics Thrust, which is going to be used pretty frequently because we do have access to cards like the Ceruli and the Ken and Gen line, which always gives the opponent a monster, which means that this card is going to be able to add basically any card that we want. And you can even add like some of the previous cards shown, such as the Dark Corridor, if I can find it, and the Allure of Darknesses, right? So, but if you're not adding those, you have plenty of other valid targets as well, like the Triple Tactics Talent, which is going to be the spell card that we're going to be using to basically rip the final card out of the opponent's hand, because Sillva has to basically hit 2 every single time. So, and your opponent starts with 5, right? So you hit 2, 2, and then Sillva can't get the last one, so you just go through the talent to be able to rip that one away, or take advantage of its other 2 effects to draw 2 cards, or just like if you happen to go second, take an opponent's monster. We're also playing 1 instant fusion, which is literally only in here to be able to summon out Millenniumize Restrict and basically act as a secondary copy of Call by the Grave. But I mean, these are 1-ofs, right? You're not going to be able to see them constantly, but it's nice to have the option every now and then. And then lastly, we have the 1 card destruction as the auto win button, because if this card resolves and we're discarding a bunch of cards, it's typically going to be way too much advantage for the opponent to overcome. And with that, that's the spell lineup. We don't play any traps because this is basically an all-in type of deck, but if you're going like first, I mean, what floodgates do we have available to us anymore at this point? But if you're going first for like game 3 or game 2, you just put in some floodgates and then that's your trap lineup, right? But yeah, it's the main deck. It's 40 cards like always, and now we can finally move on to the extra deck. Now that we're on the extra deck portion, we're going to be starting off with the Exceed monsters first, and we're only playing 1, this time being the 1 number 62 years, the Timeless, as we don't care about the boost effect. Sometimes we want to use the Reborn effect, but more often than not, we're basically just using this as a consistency card to be able to draw 2, discard 1, because that's what this deck tries to do, right? We love drawing, we love discarding, and this card just allows us to do that whenever we happen to have 2 level 4s on the field. That's it for the Exceeds, though, and then for the Links, which basically make up a majority of the deck, we're going to be playing 1 Dark, the Dark Charmer Gloomy, just a great generic Link 2 monster that just takes 1 Dark monster as a material and lets us take a Dark monster from the opponent's graveyard, which I don't really know how effective that is currently going to be, just because I feel like Dark isn't very well represented, but at least not like in the meta decks, right? Because like K9 is basically like all Earth, or just like different attributes. Same goes for like Vanquish Soul for the most part. It's basically just like for Mitsurugi, I guess, at this point. But you know, you take an opponent's monster and then you're either going to be link climbing with it, or you're just using it because it's like a really strong, impactful monster. So yeah, 1 Dark, perfectly fine. Then we're playing 1 Muckraker from the Underworld, which is obviously a very powerful card, but it is a little bit limiting in the fact that on the turn that it's link summoned, you can't use it as link material, which already is pretty like, I'm not going to say awful, but it's definitely irritating. And then to make matters worse, its effect, which is to discard a card to bring back a Fiend monster from the graveyard, is very powerful, but unfortunately it does lock us into Fiends for the rest of this turn. So you have to be a little bit careful with this one, because a lot of the cards in the extra deck are not Fiends, and you are going to be cutting off your potential if you go for this a little bit too early, right? So try to save it for like the end, or when you're like in a desperate situation where you don't have any other plays available to you. But yeah, Muckraker, just, it's a phenomenal card. It's a shame that it's so restricting. Then after that, we are still going to be playing the Security Dragon as well as the Akashic Magician, which are basically just 2 cards that allow us to bounce back the monsters that we give to the opponent, being the Ceruli and the Genikens. Then we have the 1 IP Masquerena, which is typically going to be an end board piece that allows us to go into either the SP Little Knight, as it's like a great generic removal / general nuisance. 1 Nightmare Cerberus, which is a card that allows us to pop special summon monsters on the opponent's side of the field, and the Nightmare Unicorn, which lets us basically shuffle any card on the opponent's side of the field back into the deck. Now, unfortunately, when it comes to the Nightmares, they discard for cost, so they will not trigger your Dark World effects, but they will trigger your Danger effects. So, you know, just something to be aware of. That's it for the Link 2s and the 1 Link 3. And then for the Link 4s, we're going to be starting off with the Saryuja Skull Dread. This deck basically floods the fields with a million monsters anyways, so having something like Saryuja that we can just make to clean up the board, as well as just generally fix our hand by allowing us to draw 4 cards and then put 3 bad cards at the bottom of the deck, genuinely helps out so much. And all of its other effects are really solid too, right? As anytime a monster gets summoned to a zone it points to, it boosts it by 300, which, I mean, whatever. But more importantly than that, we can special summon a monster from our hand, which just allows us to extend even further than we normally would be able to. So yeah, 1 Saryuja. We have the 1 Abawaku, the Lightless Shadow, which is just like a good generic Link 4 monster that has 2 very solid effects where we can discard a card, once again for cost, so it will not trigger your Dark Worlds. But after we discard, we get to either Reborn a Light or Dark in the graveyard, which is basically every monster that we play, or we get to pop a card on the opponent's side of the field. So no matter what we happen to bring back or destroy, this card is going to be like a general nuisance for the opponent. And then lastly, we're going to be trying out World Sea Dragon Zealantis. So this was actually recommended a lot in the previous video, but I didn't really understand it yet. Because they were saying you use this to basically like retrigger like Geninken and Ceruli, but I don't know. I finally understood what they meant by that, because I thought like when you summon the Zealantis, it lets them keep the monsters that you gave them, but apparently you're able to summon back the monsters that you used the Zealantis with. So if you give them a Ceruli or a Gan or Ken, you banish those and then summon them to your own side of the field. And in the case of Ceruli, you can bounce it back with cards such as like Grapha or Reign-beaux. And when you get back your Ken, you can then activate its a field or its on field effect to give the opponent again and force them to discard one card. So yeah, this card really silly. I'm not gonna lie. I can't believe it took so long for this one to come up because it's been around for basically forever. I never realized that you got your monsters back, the ones that you gave to the opponent. So yeah, one Zealantis perfectly fine. And then for the fusions, we're playing the one Millennium Eyes Restrict, which is basically just there for our instant fusion target, which I said is basically Call by the Grave number 2, and then 2 Grapha fusions just to help finish off the end or finish off the deck list. But admittedly, you typically never go into more than one, so if you want to cut one just to be able to include like another extra deck monster, by all means go for it. I'd probably start there. And with that, that's the Danger Dark World list. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya!